This year presented by the New Orleans Tourism and Cultural Fund. Give yourselves a big hand for being here, as well as the New Orleans Tourism and Cultural Fund. This is the only festival in Louisiana dedicated to Louis Armstrong. Are there any other Louis Armstrong festivals in the world?
There's the Louis Armstrong Continuum, run by our friends, the Louis Armstrong Educational Foundation. I see Jackie Harris here.
President.
Okay.
Other than that, I think that's
Okay,
all the games
so-
in town.
Well, it's the only one in Louisiana. It says
That's
right
true.
on this piece of paper. And it's produced by the French Quarter Festival Incorporated, a nonprofit organization showcasing New Orleans cultural heritage since 1984. Now, this festival is made possible through the generosity of our sponsors and supported through your purchase of official festival merchandise and delicious beverages. So take some time out of the air conditioning and go get yourself a glass of Corbel. I saw that on the sign. I might get one of those hats because I'm bald and, it will cover my head in the sun, which is good. Anyway, you find yourself at the Satchmo Legacy stage, and this is in memory of Joni Berry. Joni, she was a dancer and dance advocate and a philanthropist. She was a great friend of the festival. She passed away a few years ago. And it is sponsored by the Joseph K. and Inez Eichenbaum Foundation, which was run by Joni. And Mr. Stephen Maitland-Lewis is here, who is representing the foundation, is a great friend of this festival. Give him a big hand of applause. Also, the Ella Fitzgerald Charitable Foundation.
Oh, yeah.
Give them a big hand of applause.
Yeah.
And watching from what city in New Jersey?
Mawa.
Mahwah, New Jersey. Richard and Vicky Norigian. Give them a big hand of applause. In 2008, I was the curator of this part of the festival, and I noticed that the people were older who were presenting. And I said, there has to be some young, strapping young person who knows about Louis Armstrong. And I come across a blog called dippermouth.blogspot.com, and it was very enthusiastic and smart and funny, and so I called my friend Dan Morgenstern, and I said, do you know about this Riccardi guy? And he said, get him. He has films I've never seen. So I did. That was in 2008. In 2009, few people actually have their actual real dream job. And he has that. He started working for the Louis Armstrong House Museum. He's written 2 books, just turned in a 3rd. And he has been here and has been like kind of the centerpiece for 15 years now. And I just want to give you one anecdote. On the first time he was here, he did films at the end of each day. And on the 3rd day, he got a standing ovation. And his wife was crying in the front row. And it was really one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. So give a big hand to Ricky Riccardi. Now, I don't know, I mentioned Don and the pandemic. During the pandemic, Ricky, if you follow him, he was curating a series of a website, That's My Home, about Louis Armstrong, and it still continues.
Still going, yep.
Yeah, and he did that during the pandemic. Now, during the pandemic, Ms. Maxine Gordon, give her a big hand of applause. She had a special dispensation to travel to France, Provence in particular, from the French government because of it was a special cultural visa to work on her book that is forthcoming called Quartet, Stories from the Lives of 4 Women Jazz Musicians, Maxine Sullivan, Velma Middleton, Melba Liston, and Shirley Scott. And that is going to be published jointly by Columbia University and Howard University Press. Now, her last book, a biography of her late husband, Sophisticated Giant, The Life and Legacy of Dexter Gordon, won many awards, including the ASCAP Deems Taylor Award for Biography. She is a jazz advocate, educator, writer. She's project director of Women Who Listen, an oral history project with women jazz fans. She's been doing that since 2005. Also, I have to get this right. This guy knows, I'm sure, with
Oh,
the
yeah.
Harvard hat on, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
She is a Radcliffe Fellow at the Institute for Advanced Studies at Harvard University. I give you Riccardi and Maxine Gordon.
Yay.
Hello, Maxine.
Hi, Ricky.
We're back again. We just figured out 7 years in a row. We even did a Zoom during COVID together
Oh, yeah, when your book,
to keep the streak
the
going.
second book came out with the train.
Yes,
character. Yeah.
yes, indeed. Well, you guys are going to hear way too much of me over the weekend, so I'm just going to say, Maxine, why don't you take it away and tell
Already?
us already? Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'd like to begin by thanking Satchmo Fest, of course, and Ricky, because what's the first year I came?
2016.
Right. After that, every year I think of some other reason to come. Oh, we could talk about this. So I would send an email to Ricky, how about this idea? And he usually likes my ideas, which is a little unusual. And then I got invited back. So I want to thank him, as always, because on this subject of Velma Middleton, I thank Ricky Riccardi because I've told this story many times. But when I was doing the research on the Dexter Gordon biography, Dexter Gordon worked with Louis Armstrong in 1944. So he always wanted in the outline for his book a chapter on Louis Armstrong, and so I didn't know really much then about Louis Armstrong as much as I should have known. And so then I contacted Ricky, email probably, or phone.
I think it was email first.
Email,
yeah.
okay. And I said, could I come out to the archive and do you have anything on Dexter Gordon? And he said, we don't have anything in the index, but we could look at 1944 see if there's anything you could use. So he pulled out 1944, and there was a photo of Dexter in the Louis Armstrong band. He's sitting in the end, and of course he's very recognizable, and he had big feet, and he sat at the end, and and he was only 21 at the time. And so that, began my research about him and who was in the band and that. And then I said to him, well, who's the singer in the white dress? And I never forget the look, because if you're a jazz fan and sometimes you say something like, oh, who's the piano player? And they give you the look like, how could you ask that stupid question? He gave me the look, but he's polite. And he was like, well, that's Velma Middleton. And I was like, okay, good. And, I wrote it down as a note, and then slowly I became, obsessed is negative, so I call it very interested in Velma. And when I was finishing the Dexter Gordon biography, something happens, if you've written a book, where the next book, wants to be written, and so if you kind of hear the voices, and so I heard Velma say, what about me? What about me? And the other three women also, I'd had thought about, why isn't anybody writing about these people, And so, but especially Velma, and she is sorely overlooked. Or was. She's not anymore because we don't allow her to be overlooked. Okay, so about this talk, well, we call it the final tour because she died, in fact, on this tour in Sierra Leone, Africa. This is a tour, 3-month tour of Africa, Louis Armstrong. 1960, the first part is sponsored by Pepsi Cola in West Africa, and then the State Department. And it was grueling. We'll show you the itinerary. But it sounds like, when I'm writing about her, it's not, she died, she was going to be 44, so she was 43, we think. And so then it could be like, another tragic jazz story, but it's not tragic, okay? Because she started working when she was 13. So, it's not like she didn't have a long career, successful career. She was almost 20 years with Louis Armstrong. She went all over the world. They were, very close. She and he had the beautiful relationship. So, and she had a good life. She had a happy life. Like my late husband said, anybody who knows me, will not cry when I die because I had a good life. And, I lived longer than most of my friends. So I don't want her to, to be the
Tragic figure,
tragic ending. But I want to tell the story about the tour. So, okay, I'm supposed to keep this brief. But I was at Radcliffe at Harvard. Are you a Harvard man? Somebody waved at me at Harvard. Okay. With this fellowship for 10 months. And I went to the map division. Scott, what's it? Oh, God. I want to thank the guy in the map division, Scott Walker. Somebody said, this is Harvard. They have a map. They have a whole, maps from, forever, maps. So I went to the map division of the Pusey Library, and I said, I have this idea about jazz geography. I want to map these 4 women from their birth, and then, maybe pick up on a tour. And I always had in mind this tour of Africa to look, because it's one thing to look at an itinerary and then they list, date and location. Well, we don't know where this, or I don't know where this is. And I was a road manager, so I do know something about geography in Europe. But the Africa tour is when you see. So the map person at Harvard, he said, that's an interesting project. Yeah, I like to work on that, which was, very rewarding that somebody didn't think I had a bad idea. And so we have maps that he is worked on with me on the tour. And then on another part of the book, on Melba Liston, there's a tour with Dizzy, they call Middle East Tour in 1956, so I'm mapping that. And then I'm mapping on all of them, like where they're born, and then what that's about, because Velma is born in Holdenville, Oklahoma, and that's a sundown town. And which, if you don't know what a sundown town is, that means black people could not go out after dark, and if they did and they were shot, it wasn't against the law. So she comes from that to end her life on having a stroke on a 3-month tour with Louis Armstrong in Africa. So there's some kind of, to me, a meaning of, a person's life is like, I don't know if it's predestined, but she had a big life. She had a big life. So, okay?
So far, so good.
You got it now, right?
Well, we're going to do the maps?
What,
or are we gonna, you want to read about Africa in 1960? I know you have.
You want me to say more about the tour?
Keep going. Take
Okay.
another
What do we have?
I've got the
first?
maps lined up.
Okay. Okay. So, do you want me to list the? Do we list the itinerary?
I do have the itinerary. Yeah, a little bit later on. But
Okay.
We could just we'll show the first map here, which covers the first 2 weeks of the tour.
I think. Do we have the personnel? Because I wanted to.
Oh yeah, all right. So we'll jump around here.
Okay,
but,
let's.
all right.
I just want to start with who was on the tour. It's a 3-month tour. There were 12 people traveling together almost every day. There were a few places that they stayed more than one day, which we show on the map. But this is. Can they see it clearly?
Well,
Okay.
I'll tell you what it is. This
Okay.
is a State Department memo listing everybody that was going to go on the trip. So this was organized back, go back here. This is June 28th, 1960. This is a letter sent by Associated Booking, Joe Glazer's office, to Dr. Alexander Schiff, who was Louis Armstrong's road doctor from 1953 to the end of his life. And this was when it was still just kind of being set in motion. And so there's a list of the countries they were going to visit. If you want an idea of Louis Armstrong's life, the page on the right there is his itinerary just for a couple of months from July through September of 1960. So when you hear these things about one-nighters, this is it. This was Armstrong, just turned 60 years old, literally traveling every night. And then there's handwritten on the bottom there when they're going to go to Africa in October. Dr. Schiff, being a doctor, he was also in charge of the immunizations. So they had to get shots. Typhoid, smallpox, all of that. Everybody had to get their vaccines. We actually have the bass player's Mort Herbert's immunization record, and the band boy, Leroy Thomas, his record. So all of them had to get all the vaccines. And then this is Doc Schiff's date book. He's got nothing through October, but this whole tour begins there about October 12th, and it is completely filled night by night, city by city. There's a month off in December where they filmed Paris Blues. So everybody got to take a quote-unquote vacation in Paris for a month and then go right back to Africa in January into February of 1961. At the end of January, the famous photos of Louis and the Great Sphinx of Giza in Egypt, those were taken on January 28th. But then just to show you the cast of characters here, of course, we have Louis and Lucille, who actually celebrated their wedding anniversary in London on the way over to Ghana. And three figures you don't hear too much about, but they were kind of crucial. The man on the left is Pierre Frenchy Talleyrand. He was the road manager, one of the most despised figures.
Why is that?
They hated him. Yeah, Louis called him Simon Legree. He was kind of Joe Glazer's spy. So he was there to make sure, the people Louis was talking to, the people who were backstage. If he saw something he didn't like, he would call Glazer. Glazer would call Louis. And so nobody really trusted Frenchy. But he was the one who was in charge of getting the band where they needed to go, the road manager life. The man in the middle is Dr. Alexander Schiff. Like I said, if you watch any boxing matches from Madison Square Garden in the 50s and 60s, there's a good chance you will hear the ringside physician is Dr. Alexander Schiff. All the Muhammad Ali fights, Emil Griffith, Sugar Ray Robinson, that was his day job, but Joe Glazer paid him to travel, so Louis always had a doctor. And the man on the right is Hayes's Doc Pugh. He was Louis's valet from the mid-40s until his passing in the mid-60s. Doc Pugh was the gatekeeper. If you wanted to get to Louis in his dressing room, you had to know Doc Pugh. You had to talk to Doc Pugh. Multiple people told me Doc Pugh had all the secrets. He knew what Louis needed to get through his day, all that stuff. They all look very tired in these photos. So not an easy job being on the road. Never mind playing the trumpet, but just traveling 300 nights a year, not easy.
Okay, so Ricky found, because I knew that these three people had also traveled. There's one we don't have a picture of.
Leroy Thomas, the band boy. We don't have a picture.
But Ricky, of course, found photos of these people because, we always hear, the band, the band travel, but I just wanted to be sure we know who was in the band also. So we have Velma, who was born September 1st, 1917, and dies February 10th, 61, born in Holdenville, Oklahoma, okay? And she was with the Louis Armstrong Orchestra and then the All Stars. You notice they're all hyphen stars.
It always varies, yeah.
Yeah, All Stars, from 42 to 61. And then you have Barney Bogart, whose name was Albany.
Albany
Leon Bogart, born March 3rd, 1906 in New Orleans, died 1980. He was with the All-Stars 1947 to 55, and then 60 to 61. And then you have Trummy Young, now born James Osborne Young, trombone, January 12, 1912 to September 10, 1984, born in Savannah, Georgia, with Louis Armstrong, 1952 to 1964. When people had a gig, they tend to stay.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
These were road warriors.
Right? And then Billy Kyle was William Osborne Kyle Jr., piano, July 14, 1914, to February 23rd, 1966, born in Philadelphia.
Also died on the road.
Yeah, right. And then the bass player is Mort Herbert. Herbert Pelovitz Morton, bass, June 30th, 1925 to June 5th, 1983, born in Somerville, New Jersey. And he's white. So this is very interesting because they could not go to South Africa, and they did not come to New Orleans for 10 years.
That whole time.
And
yeah.
I know we did it on purpose.
Oh, yeah, the integrated band. Oh,
Definitely
yeah.
did it on
Yeah,
purpose.
yeah.
So we have photos of him. And then there's Danny Barcelona, Daniel Plaga Barcelona drums, July 23rd, 1929 to April 1st, 2007, born in Waipahu, Hawaii. I don't know if I'm saying it right. Of Filipino-American descent. And he was with the Armstrong All Stars, 1958 to 1971.
end.
So,
Yeah.
we're always looking at Louis Armstrong, but these people, when you travel like that, that group,
Yeah.
there are no secrets, okay?
Exactly.
I was the road manager. I'll never tell what I know. But, to think of them going to Africa and what he said about being in Africa when he saw the woman that looked like his mother,
yeah.
they're never going to be the same
Right.
person they were before, because think about what was happening in this country when they're in Africa. When you look at the pictures, and he's like a king in Africa, and then he come back here where, can't go in the front door. So,
Yeah.
okay, onward.
Well, this is so now you know about the band. This is an offstage photo. This was taken in Houston. The woman sitting there apparently was one of Louis's cousins. Her name's Louise Baudru. I have not done the genealogy to see exactly cousin on whose side, but she hosted Louis and the All Stars when they were passing through Houston. And so, yeah, Danny Barcelona, Mort Herbert standing, Trumma Young in the middle, Barney Bigard, Billy Kyle standing, and Louis in the middle. Just wanted to show it off stage because, this band was like a family. They're performing every night, but they also are eating together. They're on the bus, staying. Oh, yeah, no, there's great photos from this gathering, red beans and rice and everything. And, of course, a photo of the band on stage. This is during one of the stops of the tour. You'll see Louis wearing traditional African garb. He came out and kind of surprised the audience. But in the background is a big Pepsi Cola logo. And as Maxine mentioned, the first part of this tour was actually sponsored by Pepsi. They were opening bottling plants in Nigeria and Ghana, and they thought it would be fun to have Louis Armstrong kind of be the spokesperson. And boy, if there was ever a spokesperson, I know Jackie, call Lisa. We got to get a Pepsi deal. I mean, it already.
We should get them.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
the ads write themselves, but Louis was happy to sponsor that portion, and Pepsi, they set him up. This is Louis in Nigeria meeting Sir Amadou Bello, the premier of northern Nigeria. Velma in the background is kind of reacting. You can see her covering her face. We actually have a beautiful color snapshot of this moment, and the other man standing there in the glasses on the other side of Louis is the Emir of Kano. We actually have his guards here. We know this because Pepsi, they put this stuff out as press releases. So they're the royal guards of the Emir of Kano pictured in the palace courtyard. So, they're looking pretty serious. But, once people meet Louis Armstrong, they all have a good time. So that was the Pepsi portion. And then Maxine found this photo of Velma.
Thanks, Ricky.
Yeah. One that I had not seen before with Louis, obviously, I guess, in the Cameroon portion of the tour. But I think I should go back. We should talk about the Congo because that's become the most famous. Another photo Maxine found of Louis arriving in the Congo. And should we show the newsreel?
Yeah.
All right. This is newsreel footage, Associated Press, that was shown in movie theaters of Armstrong arriving in Leopoldville. This is the famous story when the Civil War was going on and both sides called a truce because Armstrong was there. There's more to that story. We'll talk about that in a second.
One of America's most popular emissaries gets a warm reception as he arrives in the troubled Congo on a State Department-sponsored goodwill mission. Louis Satchmo Armstrong, whose golden trumpet has preached the gospel of New Orleans jazz on every continent, arrives in truly royal style. Louis' solid swinging outraged Radio Moscow, which blasted Armstrong's visit as a diversionary tactic, a left-handed tribute to a mellow cat, the Congolese find right on the beam.
Now, it's interesting that the newsreel mentions that Russia was saying this was a diversionary tactic, because this is something that came back. This was a big article that kind of exploded a year or two ago, where there's been recent research showing that basically Louis kind of was a Trojan horse, that him showing up and stopping the war was for the CIA to do their thing, the Lumumba and everything going on in the background. And Maxine, do you have any commentary on this aspect?
I have a comment.
I had a feeling.
You know, I got, there's a book, it's called White Menace. That was it's a British.
Malice.
Yeah. Oh, thank you.
Yes.
Yes. But what I object to is assuming that Louis Armstrong is duped, because I don't think you could dupe Louis Armstrong. So the fact that the CIA was in Africa, that's a fact. We know that, you know, the countries that had oil, you know, that of course the government is involved. But so there's a picture of him with somebody who's later identified as CIA. But to me, let's not think that he's not aware of he's being used by the government to represent something that maybe isn't exactly true about the U.S., because of course they're using it as propaganda that, you know, the U.S., you know, they love black people and they love music, and, you know, he represents something that when he goes back, of course, he does not.
Right.
So there's a tendency, to me, maybe I'm overly sensitive about Louis Armstrong, to like undermine his, first of all, his intelligence and his obvious knowledge of, you know, being used, but I mean, who's being used, right? Because it paid really well.
Yeah.
You know, the band made a lot of money on that tour. So, you know, it's like when we look at the record business, you know, they're underpaid, but then they use those recordings to get more gigs where they got paid. You know, it's like, it's complicated, right?
And the funny thing is, Louis had avoided State Department tours for years. A lot of people assume that every time he went overseas was State Department, ambassador of goodwill, but no, he inspired the State Department's involvement. His tour in '55, the Ambassador Satch tour, was picked up by Edward R. Murrow and New York Times and everything, and that inspired Adam Clayton Powell and the government to start the program. But they didn't choose Louis first. They chose Dizzy, and then once Louis spoke out against Little Rock, you know, they they
kept him quiet
they
for
kept
a minute.
For a few years. And we have a tape at the archives where he's, you know, off stage complaining. So the people want me to go on these government tours because I'm not going to talk and do this for the government. So send John Foster Dulles to do the talking. I just want to play the trumpet. But he changed his mind for this tour, and I think he did know, you know, why and what was happening. But, you know, not everybody gets to stop a war for whatever the reasons every day. And so he did remain proud of that.
One day.
Yeah.
That's so great.
So here's Louis on the Mike Douglas show in 1970 reminiscing about that, and then he actually talks a little bit about his reception in Africa, and he brings us back to Velma.
You know, he went to Nigeria, seriously, and they stopped the war to honor his run.
Yeah.
We're going to show the picture. Here's what happened. Sure.
Yeah.
I'm serious.
And
Now there he is. Look at this. They stopped the war and put him up there.
you know what that
He's
is?
like a king there. Huh?
That's Leopoldville.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, that
We
was-
came off that ferry, and then we got in automobile, and no more shooting, and then they paraded all through the city.
And
the
Lucille said-
day of the concert, they put me on this chair. And you know, you got to be somebody to ride in that chair there.
When they put you in that
That's better than
chair,
old rocking chair there.
did you know what they were going to do when they put you in that chair? Did you get scared at all while you were over there?
With my people. All they know. All they know about old Satchmo all through the
Did
jungle.
they call that the way they
all
called
through
you?
the jungle, Satchmo.
Lucille, your wife said she said that you, now the concert he mentioned, and it was in Leopoldville. There were
Leopoldville.
100,000 people showed up. They
That's
came
right.
out of the jungles to hear this man.
You could walk on heads for 5 blocks and never fall.
Really?
They were standing so close.
Walk on it. Just a wall of flesh.
And Velma Middleton, you know, the kind of stout girl I had singing
Yes.
and well stocked up. Anyway, she goes into a dance, and at that time, we'd be playing and she'd make a split zam. And all them Africans was rushing to the bandstand. They got so excited, so the commander said, "Go into sleeping time down south right quick."
And let me say, Louis remained proud. We have scrapbooks. He made an entire scrapbook devoted to this tour. And so here's some of his, him cutting out these clippings. Wizard Satchmo unites the Congo. And then, his collages in the middle there, Africa, 1961. And another thing he saved, a tape he was given in the Congo of all tributes that were written to him. Here's dedicated by the people of Congo to Satchmo. And so here's one of them that he also saved in a scrapbook page. Bonjour, Okuka, greetings, Okuka. And I have a translation that was sent to me, and I'll just play a minute of this.
Kombejo, Kombejo,
Yeah, one of the good ones. But I do want to play a little bit of Louis and the All Stars. So about 2 years ago, we got a call at the Armstrong Archives. Actually, it was an email first. Guy did not put his name on it, and he said, "Listen," he said, I was in the Army. We were in the Ivory Coast. Louis and the All Stars came in, I think, early December 1960, and we were told beforehand, do not record this show. Recording is forbidden. And he said, well, we set up our recorder. we secretly hid the microphone, and we recorded the whole set. He goes, I have the tape. I want to donate the tape. And then I said, that's wonderful. This is great. And I said, can I send you a thank you letter? What should I put in the record? He's like, don't mention my name. This was 60 years later. I still don't know his name. But he recorded it, and it turned out to be, it's the last recording we have of Velma. Because after this concert, they went to Paris for the month. Last year, we played the Paris recordings. But soon after, we'll get to that in a moment. But here's a beautiful montage of photos by the late Herb Snitzer, taken in June of 1960, just to show Velma in action. But here's the first, it's like an 8-minute performance. I'm just going to play the first 2 minutes of St. Louis Blues, the W.C. Handy classic. And it's poignant, Velma talking about loving that man till the day she dies. This is about 2 months before her passing.
We're gonna pay a little dedication to W.C. Handy's St. Louis Blues, sung by our vocalist, Velma Middleton.
Evening sun go down. Sir, I hate to see that evening sun go down. It makes me feel like I'm on my last go round. If I'm feeling tomorrow like I feel today. Ho, 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 feeling tomorrow like I feel today. Gonna pack my trunk, make my getaway. St. Louis woman wears her diamond ring. She pulls a man around by her apron string. If it wasn't for powder, store-bought hair, that man that I love, he would never go nowhere, nowhere. I love my man like a schoolboy love his pie. Louis Armstrong blows so nice and high. Gonna love that man until the day I die.
Velma would go into her dance at that point.
You know what?
Yeah.
We should do a record, an album of Velma. You know, Extract Like That and other things.
She did a lot of features. That's the
Right?
thing, yeah.
Okay.
There's more.
That'd be our next
We'll
project.
take this
Okay.
conversation off stage.
Because she doesn't have her own album.
No.
And that would be good for people to hear, you know.
And she recorded 2 singles as a leader in the 50s.
We could use that.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
good.
All right.
We don't
We have an
enough
idea.
to
Next
do,
year,
yeah.
we'll be back next year.
Okay.
Just to show you how grueling this tour was, I mean, you know, we're about to approach the tragic end of Velma, but Louis at one point, here's an article, this is towards the end of the Paris day, where there is Dr. Alexander Schiff. So Louis had to rest because he was dealing with exhaustion. And then we have a tape where Louis talks about how at one point, Trummy Young showed up with a doctor's note that he needed a night off. And apparently Louis, you know, wired Joe Glazer, and Glazer's like, "Do you want me to send another trombone player?" So Trummy showed up. But one night Barney Bigard didn't show up. You know, he was just too tired, and they had to play without a clarinet player. So the whole band was kind of breaking down. My pet theory, Louis had a heart attack in Spoleto, Italy in June of '59. And a lot of people always say, that's the beginning of the end. But when you hear his recordings in '59 and '60, even '61, I mean, he's still, the heart attack had no effect on him. This tour had an effect on him. I don't think he was ever quite the same in terms of stamina, and I think this one really did him in.
And Velma dying.
Well, that too, yeah. So the beginning of the end for Velma, there's an article from January 16th, paralysis strikes jazz vocalist Velma Middleton, and she was in Freetown, Sierra Leone, and made the newspapers. There is a letter that Louis Armstrong wrote to Joe Glazer, panicked about how Velma has a stroke. I've never seen anything like this. You have to do something. You have to help her. But Louis was real firm in that showbiz tradition of the show must go on. And he got criticized for that. And we have a tape after he got home from tour where he privately with his wife Lucille fought back. And Louis said, when my mother died, when my father died, because I didn't miss a job, you know. So it's like, you know, we were sad for Velma, I guess, but there's contracts, there's audiences, there's people. Yeah, he said, I got to go out there and perform. At one point, the clipping on the right, it was early February, and if you could read the caption, it actually says Velma had a heart attack. She wasn't paralyzed. She'll be back in a few weeks. I think that was just, you know, trying to not make it that serious. But the end came on February 10th, 1961. They gave Velma's age as 45. I think through some of Maxine's research, she might have been 2 years younger, correct?
Or older. There's a little
There's a
discrepancy.
little
but
discrepancy.
We say she died when she was 44, but
Yeah.
40 she would have been 44 in September.
I think that's it.
Yeah,
Yeah, 40.
yeah.
So 43. And yeah, there's all these beautiful tributes. You know, this was in Sepia magazine. They did a whole thing in which they actually mentioned in this article that Louis knew her health was not great, and he had offered to pay her 6 months' salary not to go to Africa, not to even go on
can't
this
prove
tour.
that, right?
And it's in the article.
Okay, yeah.
But you know, she still went, and so this whole article is about her troopers passing. And then the funeral, Louis was still overseas, but Joe Glazer was able to get the body and sent to New York, and they had a big funeral. Over 500 people showed up. And after Louis returned to New York in March, he gave an interview in which he talked about how he was sending all of Velma's paychecks to her mother, and he said, the checks will keep coming until I run out of money myself. So I'm sure Velma's family was kept on the payroll. One thing I realized jumping around, we didn't spend that much time with the maps. We're going to close with the newsreel, but let's just go through the maps real quick.
Yeah, we
just
showed the map.
just to show. So once again, we'll take them one at a time here. This is the first leg of the tour, which was the second half of October 1960. So you could see kind
So
of.
we met, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'll just show you. So what he did in the map division was do it like they came from France, and then here's how they traveled in the beginning. And what are the dates? October 12th to October 30th. So that was like the beginning of the tour.
Then November.
And in November, they went all to this area in Tanzania and what's now Zimbabwe, and, you know, but it was Rhodesia, and southern Rhodesia, and northern Rhodesia. And the thing about the Congo is very confusing, what it was called then and now we have Democratic Republic of the Congo, but Leopoldville is King Leopold, right, of Belgium. That's like a really bad story. And, you know, but he's there like in the middle of all, this is the year of Africa. They call it the year of Africa. 17 countries become independent in 1960. And there is Louis Armstrong traveling and playing every night in the midst of all this, what's happening, you know, in Africa. So it's not separate from the history and the timing. That's what I mean about jazz geography. It's not just the itinerary. I mean, we have to think about what's happening in those places and what's happening when they get back. Because they're not the same person. They have to come back to the shit here, right? Okay, next. So this is November to December when they go to Paris for that month when he makes the film, but then has a gig like every night at the Hot Club and everything. So it's supposed to be a break, which he didn't take. But I mean, look at the travel, you know, all the way down to Mozambique and up, and I mean, unbelievable.
And then the return.
Unbelievable, right?
And here's the return
Oh, yeah.
in January. This was the final leg. And like I said, even from here, when they finished here, after Velma passed and all, they still did about a month in Europe.
Yeah.
Sweden, Germany.
Right.
I believe they went back to England. So yeah, Louis left Corona, Queens, his home in early October and didn't return until the beginning of March.
Right.
And he had teeth problems at the end.
Oh,
He said
yeah.
the last month he played in pain every night. Joe Glazer gave him a month off, which was unheard of when he got home because he was really beat up. But here's the complete tour, thanks to our
Okay.
friend Scott Walker.
Those are the countries with the names at that time. So, you know, we went back and forth. And then when I was at Radcliffe, I met one of the other fellows was from Zimbabwe. So I showed her the map, and she was like, oh, yeah, no, you have to get it right for 1960 because, you know, it's not, there was no Zimbabwe in 1960. So, you know, that's why my book is not done. Because I'm very interested in mapping now. You know, the mapping thing has become central to the way I'm thinking about being a musician and about what it means, the road and the travel. And, you know, I hadn't put it together that, you know, I was a road manager. And so even now, if I get on a train in Europe, I'm like, I have serious flashback, okay? Because I was like, oh, I remember when, you know, and Dizzy's went to Belgium, and then these guys tried to come from the Congo, and the promoter said, oh, we don't let those people in, and it was, you know, that was in the 70s, and then he said, what people? You know, you mean my people? And they were like, yeah, but we had this war, and we don't like them. And he was like, well, they probably don't like you. And, you know, it was like, so it was in the 70s in Brussels. It was the same tension, and, you know, it wasn't over. And Dizzy said, it's never over. He said that, yeah.
Well, Maxine, we have about 3 minutes left,
Oh.
and
You know,
I think it's time to close
The
with
final.
your other surprise.
Okay.
Why don't you tell the folks about British passport? Sorry.
Anybody wants to email us if you know more about this subject, and, you know, please, we need help.
You want
Okay,
you want
this-
to want to introduce this?
Okay. In my research, I found that it's silent. It's a newsreel. It's how long? 3 minutes.
3 minutes.
It's about the band in Rhodesia, and it's silent. And you see Velma at the end. So shortly after this, she has a stroke and dies in Africa. So
The last
it's
footage.
very
Yeah.
quite poignant and silent. Okay. But you hear that newsreel noise, right? Okay. There are a lot of trumpet players in Rhodesia, I heard.
That's it. Yeah.
At the end. I wonder where she got those shoes.
A trooper's passing. So should we start planning next year?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're going to take
And
the conversation.
I want to know who made her clothes and where she got the shoes. So that's like, we must know somebody who knows that, right, Jackie? We have to find somebody who can figure that out, right?
All right.
Thank you,
Oh,
everybody.
Okay, Ricky Riccardi and Maxine Gordon.
Thank you.
Ricky, of course, will be back at 4 o'clock.